everyone. I am Kelly Birmingham. This is our podcast, a retrospective look across the autism spectrum, talking about my 27 plus year career in the ABA world. And as always, I'm here with my partner in crime, Jen Lucero, mother to Dylan and Ethan. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Kelly.
I always have to remind people that I've spent 18 of those 27 plus years with you.
Yeah, for sure.
You and Dylan.
19 now.
Oh, 19. Oh my gosh. All right. So here's an interesting topic I was thinking about. And I usually derive my topics from questions I get from folks where they're asking me different questions or perspectives. And I also think back when I taught ABA coursework at Chapman University, and it got me thinking. We have, nearly 50% of all BCBAs have only been certified in the last 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you look up information about what makes someone an expert, there's different views on that topic, but a lot of the research talks about having a certain amount of field hours, a good supervisor and mentor who guides you and trains you. And we know that we have these sort of newly minted BCBAs supervising other folks and other BCBAs who haven't had the depth and years of experience. And I always have talked about the fact that family dynamics, family systems is not rarely a part of the ABA training, right? Mm-hmm. When you're training to become a BCBA, that family expectations, systems, dynamics, how a family would feel is not part of that training.
And it probably should be one of the first things.
One of the first things, right? So a topic that I saw some questions going around about were, and actually you experience this often. I hear you saying, oh, here's the new BCBA with the new ABA company or the new, program working with my son, and you're meeting a new BCBA for the first time. They're meeting Dylan for the first time, and they're doing an assessment. What I wanted to talk about was from a BCBA perspective is we are trained to do the basics in understanding challenging behavior, right? We are trained to take a look at the child, any challenging behavior they might be demonstrating, analyze the function, hypothesize and analyze the function of that challenging behavior. And hopefully a good BCBA is focusing heavily on replacement skills and in general skills-based training, teaching the child with autism more skills. All right. So I can tell you when I used to teach at Chapman and I would teach this coursework, my BCBAs would do a record review. Okay. Insurance companies have started to dictate what we should be doing. They want us to do a record review, but they don't tell you what to do with that information, by the way. I know you have a lot of experience in that. And then they tell you to ask some, basic questions about, really weird things like, did you have a C-section or not?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit, frankly?
Yeah.
They might ask you questions about the child's developmental milestones, right? Yeah. I have to tell you, I've rarely taken that into, why would I ask about a child's developmental milestones if the child's 13 and I'm meeting them for the first time, right? And so insurances have sort of dictated us on what we are to do. I want to ask you as a parent, and then I'll comment as a BCBA, when you have a BCBA coming to work with you for the first time, what do you wish the BCBAs would do and how they would behave or act towards you?
Well, I actually just had a good experience.
I know.
Just this topic. I try to do my homework. I've been doing this a long time. Dylan's 22. He's been receiving services both privately and through the school districts since he was diagnosed at 4. I asked that they, listen to me and look at this point, the history that I provide and the information that I provide based off, years of experience. I did have a great experience with that just happened. That, they did listen to me. they took the information and we discussed, what was applicable towards Dylan at this stage of his life, and what were the concerns and what were goals. And honestly, I find more and more, which I am happy about, is what are his interests, what makes him happy, what makes him successful. So I'd say, those are things that I would hope and would be asked, especially when they're older.
Yeah, it's funny if you are newly doing an assessment or an FBA and you go through the format, those types of questions might not even be there. And so if you don't know to ask them, like his interests, what makes him successful, they might not even be there.
No.
And then you mentioned something about listening to your history. So I know you're like the most prepared mom in the world, and you have this extensive history, which for Dylan, a lot of it is medical, right? There are a lot of medical needs. You also have a good sense of history on him and know that certain strategies are not particularly effective for Dylan. Like you have been very vocal to say extinction type of procedures don't work for Dylan, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, there's 3 brackets that I've always had, which I have literally could fill a room with. There's 3 categories for me with Dylan that I think apply to most people. One is, like you said, very important is medical, both medical history and current status, and how when he doesn't feel good or what medical situation's going on, that obviously we've found through the years is driving his behaviors, right? And his reactions. Also, any school information, just depending on, what stage and what age your kid is at, that is super important too. Like, obviously any IEPs, any behavior intervention plans, any testing that has had done, through the years and obviously currently. And then because, we started so young, even 2 years before he was diagnosed, I started speech therapy and occupational therapy. Has had dozens of therapies throughout the year, but keeping track of that also and sharing that information, I think, is important. Dylan was receiving services across the board and a lot crossed over. And, that's important information to know because, maybe something that is happening within, speech therapy or hippotherapy or physical therapy can actually help answer some questions that the BCBA might have as well, or just, some ideas or solutions to help too. So I think at least for my situation, there's always been those 3 important categories. And then the 4th, obviously, is the family dynamic, the family history, the current status, and always, and I keep a log to this day. And I try to give information of this is what's happening with Dylan. This is happening right now, whether it's like, hey, he didn't sleep last night. He
Right.
was up since 1 a.m. or he's had a change in medication, or he's bummed out because he's not going to be with me this weekend, or, are excited that this is going to happen. So I think the more that you upfront and communicate, then the better you are at even being able to answer questions.
Absolutely. Let's go through, we'll start off with the bad, then we'll get to the good. Let's go through some of the things that we think, and I'll name them, and you can say good or bad and share your story too. And then also share from you about some things that we've seen BCBAs that they probably should know they shouldn't be doing. And we can draw this from our experience and what other family members have told us. So anyone listening, these aren't just yours, right? You might hear from other family members. And I'll name one. We have a friend, you and I have a number of friends on Facebook. And I started seeing some parents comment some things about their BCBAs that they didn't like, which also kind of got me thinking about this podcast. And one of them was, to your point, feeling like the BCBAs had not read anything about their child prior to meeting the child.
Yeah. I think a big problem, honestly, you brought up before is that insurance is driving a lot of this now.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily just want to fault,
Mhm.
the person doing
Agreed.
the assessment or the, BCBA, because I mean, I've had certain services in place for Dylan for at one point, well over a decade, and we had a plan. And then because insurance changed, all of a sudden it was like the insurance companies trying to drive what
Yeah.
the goals are and the services. So, but yeah, I definitely have seen it happen. I think, as you know, I think a lot of people are either very green at the position, or maybe there's pressure that they feel
Yep.
like it's like a cookie cutter, ask these questions, get specific answers and short and quick. And I'm not sure of possibly some training and things like that, but I'm sure their hearts are in the right place. Probably they also have a million clients, and
Right.
I think because we've worked with so many people for so long and we know so many people, like it's just everybody is different. And the more the more you do your research, the more you read up, before you get in the situation, the better off you're going to be as the provider as well as the client. But yeah, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, me too. And so I know pro tip for BCBAs that I used to share when I was teaching was not only read the records in advance, highlight those that you have questions about, and highlight those that are based on past, you mentioned it, past programming, successful experiences, and ask the parent to clarify more about those and put that in your report, right? When you put in your treatment plan, there's no designated spot for it, except it'll say like record review. And I always, when I put in my reason for referral, I'll talk about, doctor made a medical diagnosis, the referral for ABA therapy was medical necessity and all that. Then I'll add the section that will say, review of the records found that, for example, Dylan has a medical history of this, which can impact his behavior. He has had successful interventions that worked this way in the past and has current needs around this, right? So I actually take parts out of the records, ask the parents, and then their answers go into my report. Because it tells a story, like there's a medical referral, there's an autism referral, and now the parents have shared this information on their history that will help lead towards what the goals are going to be.
Yeah. For example, the person that just came to do assessment for Dylan, she was really on it, and I could tell she did do her homework and she did research, and she read up. And it was funny because kind of the first main question that she was brought up and was concerned about as a behavior, I was like, whoa, like that's super random and odd, because it was something that must have happened in a school situation or the transition program. But honestly, I didn't even know about it, and it was definitely not something that ever happens now or a concern. And we talked about it, and then she literally crossed it off the list, even though that was like her first thing. And I understand why it was her
Because it was in the documentation she read.
yes,
Yeah.
but it's just kind of interesting, but she did listen, and we talked through, and again, getting input from the family, and maybe not even just the parent. My Ethan, my younger son, he always was great too. And sometimes I have him part of the assessment as well, because he sometimes brings up things that, maybe I'm not thinking about, or I'm too close to it or stuff,
Mhm.
because he's this, very close in age to Dylan. and, they went to same high school and blah, blah, blah. Like he maybe can bring up actually something that can end up being a concern or a goal,
Yep.
or maybe he thinks it's, based on seeing him in a different environment, that maybe it isn't an issue. So, I think, it's really good to ask a lot of questions, and again, see how much things evolve and change. Honestly, because, just when I think I got it figured out, sometimes it totally, either happens again or happens differently, or there's something new. So it's ever evolving. It's not like it's just, this is one and done,
Yeah. I love that. Bring in other family members' perspectives. I love that. I love that.
like who's around
Yep.
all the time, even step parents, who, or, neighbors, friends, I don't know, depending on like the dynamic and how close they are. I mean,
Love
I
it.
went to like people that used to work with Dylan, that are now just part of his life and friends, like you.
Like me.
Like as soon as I found out and I knew he was gonna be pissed, and he was, but as soon as I found out he was gonna start finally after 10 months, an adult day program, he started screaming, no school,
Yep.
The reason I called you and had you on speaker was to talk about it, and and now he's cool, and I've been driving him by the adult day program every day, like twice a day, and talking about, but now I'm purposely not calling it school, because it's not school. I said,
Right.
it's a program.
Yep.
You're going to start this day, and it's just going to be a couple hours. Remember my works too, which I don't know if it's good or bad. My
Right.
2 minutes down the road, but I just mean, again, like having people involved, and maybe they will think of something or an answer.
Yeah. Exactly. The other thing, and you mentioned this, is we're heavily focused on problem behavior, right? And in fact, a lot of the insurances companies try to steer us down the route of only focusing on behavior reduction, right? And what I don't think we do well enough, because we're following this sort of script, is starting off the conversation with family and family members and caregivers about strengths and interest, right? Because if we just immediately start off talking about all the problems and the challenges, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like if I just met you for the first time and asked you questions about Dylan, I only focused on the negative and the bad, how would that make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, not good, because that's like all that's going to be in your head in the beginning. I've actually seen a shift, I think, from, once we first started. And I'll say, even with regional center, like even when I do an annual, like, and the last assessments that I've had, this is comparatively like, when he first got diagnosed, but I've seen a shift where actually the first questions that I'm asked are positive.
Great.
Like, what are Dylan's interests? What do you think he's, are his strengths? What is he good at? What is he like? And yeah, I mean, think about it. Okay, I am a supervisor. And I do reviews, and I have my own reviews. If I'm doing a annual review of somebody, the first thing you start with is what they're doing right. You start with the positive, and then you go, towards the end, you go on, because everybody has something they can work on, right?
Right.
Then then you start talking about things that, what can we work on to grow? What can we work on to, it's almost like professional development.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anybody, no one wants to start off negative, no matter what aspect of your life.
Right. It's so true when you say it that way. And it's so funny, because a lot of times when you're doing an FBA, you immediately start off with what's the problem behavior and why are the reasons it's happening. And I'm glad you're feeling the shift in our industry, because it needed to shift, but instead focusing on the strengths, right? The interests, what's been successful. You know, another thing that I will talk about also might be, or ask you rather, the general like attitude of the BCBA, meaning how they approach you as a parent. I've had, and even sadly, like how they're dressed and what that looks like. And so what I'll say to you is I've had a number of, because I was out on Facebook asking questions and people were private messaging me saying, yeah, I had a BCBA do this once and it was awful, and BCBA do this once was awful. And I heard so many great things too, right? So a couple of times I've had some family members tell me that the BCBAs came in and they seemed distracted and or came across as condescending towards the family. Like, you know, like, why would you do that with your child? And why would you give that child attention when you know they're just trying to get your attention in a bad way? Like, so sort of like distracted and or condescending in a manner in how they approach the family. And instead, what we need to figure out is to teach them how to approach it in this, and I'm struggling to find the words, so I want you to give them to me, this like compassionate, collaborative manner.
Yeah, anybody and everybody should be treated with respect. I think people need to understand, especially if you're a service provider, that you're going in usually to someone's home, or
right,
or it could be they're coming to you, but you're usually dealing with the family and the individual for a couple hours in that day, maybe a couple of days a week, maybe even once a week. But then that family and that individual that you're serving is like living this 24/7. I will say, obviously, that most people are exhausted.
Yep.
Mentally, physically, emotionally. And a lot of times, like, there's days I say it, to my partner, like, dude, I'm just trying to make it through the day, and nothing worse than being told, like, you're doing something wrong, or you being just like, gullible, or, a temp or whatever. Because it's easy to say, but when, let's say your kid's been up, all night, and I work full time and I'm trying to do things right. No one's gonna beat yourself down more than you.
Yep, the parent or caregiver.
Like, especially, when things aren't going great. So that's kind of the last thing someone needs to hear.
Yep.
I think you guys take a step back as the provider. I mean, believe me, even for what I do, I see a lot. And there's some things that I'm like, oh, like, I look at it as like later on a lesson for me of, okay, I would hope not to go that route, or act like that. But it's more like I take note of it, but I would never say anything to a person or a family, that's just not, you want to do that to someone else. Like, so why do you think I think it's kind of like a scapegoat to do it because the person has autism, like,
listen, I'm guilty.
It's okay.
I'm guilty. I vividly remember, 2003, here I've worked so hard to get this certification, and I was coming in and I knew more than any parent because I understood ABA, total guilty. And I sometimes would judge, right? I would judge. And it wasn't until I started working with hundreds of families, at this point, thousands of families, when I started to hear some of the same stories, and parents are tired and they're exhausted and it's overwhelming and they're depleted of energy and resources. And that is kind of when I made the stance that, like, I just wasn't going to have families use extinction procedures anymore, for example. Like, it just wasn't working for them. And I started to understand that, there's an article that I'll link in our session notes called the Compassionate Care Model. some very famous for people that I bow down to in the industry, Dr. Bridget Taylor, Dr. LeBlanc, Dr. Nosvik, where they talk about, like, they surveyed families, and families have said, like, don't talk to us like that. And don't act distracted or too busy with us, right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think it goes back to, you and I have always said those like 5 tenets when we started this podcast, was the BCBA should ask family questions about their quality of life, right? And they should ask things like, is the child healthy, right? And work on goals around health to the best that they can, or collaborate with others. Is the child safe, right? Are they safe? Is the child happy? Is the family dynamic and household happy? And if not, why? And what tools can we bring to the parents to help them be happy? How can we help this child to be as independent as possible in their life? And then lastly is a tribe. Does the child have a tribe? Do you as a caregiver have a tribe, right? If you ask questions like that and came in with a, record review and compassionate and strength-based, what a great assessment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? What am I missing? Anything else I'm missing that you'd love new and future BCBAs to hear as a parent? You'd love those like soft skills you'd like to have them have.
I just think really reading a kid too, like, for me, and again, everybody's different, but I just want people to like want to get to know Dylan, realize that one big thing that has always driven me nuts, and if I tell you straight up, like, I want you to know and believe me that Dylan, even if he doesn't talk a ton, he is completely receptive
Yep.
to language and what is being said to and in front of him, and that he's always taking it in, and that he gets it, he's smart, he knows what's up, and he's proven that to all of us over and over. So it's a thing of, he definitely just likes someone that's chill, that will have fun with him, but in a positive way, be stern. So I think it's just really taking the time to read the individual, and then also look at how the family interacts with the individual. Because as you know, like, I talk to Dylan like I talk to anybody else.
Yep.
I talk to him just like I talk to Ethan, and that's what he responds to. So if you come in and you're either too militant or you're robotic with him, as he is famous for doing, you'll think he likes you because he will grab your hand, but he will, within 5 minutes, take you to the front door and tell you.
And he'll also do that if he thinks someone's being fake about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he can spot.
He's a great judge of character.
Yeah, he is. So is Melanie.
When I started dating again, he knows, get out. Get out of here, dude.
Awesome. Well, hopefully new BCBAs will listen to this, and they'll hear all the advice that you and I are giving. I'll put it in the session notes. I'll link the compassionate care article in the session notes. And I don't think we're done with this topic. I think that we have more to speak on it. So we'll be back on this topic, everyone.
Absolutely.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.